Carry on. So before we start talking specifically about our Canadian landscape, we're going to step back for a few minutes and look a little more at the global picture. And one country that's widely acknowledged as to be ahead of us in the development of a national digital strategy is the UK. And we thought it might be helpful to learn a little something about how that strategy has developed and what worked, what didn't, and what lessons might apply to us here in Canada. To moderate our first panel on Lessons from Digital Britain, we're pleased to welcome Trina McQueen. Trina is one of Canada's best-known broadcast executives. She's been president and COO of CTV, VP of CBC News, Current Affairs and News World, and was founding president of the Discovery Channel. Trina served on the boards of directors of the CBC, of Telefilm Canada, and the Canadian Television Fund. She's an adjunct professor at the Schulich School of Business at York University in Toronto. And joining Tina on the panel is Gina Fegan. Gina is Chief Executive of the Southeast Media Network, which has a mandate to, quote, grow the global market share of the digital content companies from the southeast of England. Gina is an expert on the emerging relationships between traditional media, new technologies, and telecommunications, and obviously she's very familiar with Digital Britain. We also have Dr. David Jacobson, Director of Emerging Technologies at PricewaterhouseCoopers in Toronto. Dr. Jacobson is a former professor at Harvard, and he has over 30 years of experience advising clients internationally on advanced technologies and their business applications in digital communications, wireless, broadband, and multimedia. So I'm going to turn things over to Trina now to lead us through what I'm sure will be a very informative discussion for the next 30 minutes or so, and then we'll open things up for questions from the audience. And again, we do hope you'll participate. We'd like to get as many perspectives as possible. If you want to tweet a question, feel free. We'll make sure it gets to Trina. Trina?
Thank you, Nora, and thank you also very much for the many, many hours of enjoyment you've given me on Spark and my beloved ENTO. You're a great public broadcaster. Okay, we are here to talk a little bit about Digital Britain and also about other global experiences in digital sovereign strategies. But before we start, I wonder if we can just kind of see who's in the audience so we know who we're talking to. You can put up your hand twice if you're in more than one category, but how many of you are involved in content? Okay. How many of you are involved in regulatory, legal, or government? Same people. How many of you would describe yourself as being mainly involved in technology? Few. And how many fall into other mysterious categories? Okay. Would academic be one of the other mysterious? Are there any academics? Okay. Right. Are there any people who just were walking by? Okay. So we know who we're talking to. And in content, can I, since many of you put up your hands for that, how many of you work exclusively in digital media content? Hardly any. How many work in many different screens or many different platforms? Interesting. And how many of you work only in conventional media? Wow. Well, more of them should be here to find out what's going on. So that's our audience, and given that, I think I'm going to start, Gina, with a question for you, which probably will be relevant. How can you make money?
I was going to say, looking at that audience makeup, there's a terrible feeling here that I might be teaching my grandmother how to suck eggs, but if you'll bear with me on that, a lot of what we've been watching is exactly that. Where do people make money? Where are the content creators going to get the next revenue stream? And I heard a piece of advice about a year ago which seems to me the most sensible thing to do in this world, which is to follow the money. It sounds really simple. Where can you follow it? And the comments we have back were, if you go into a cinema, you don't know who's watching, so therefore you can't follow the money in a cinema. When you're on television, you don't necessarily get the information back as a content creator, so again, you're not necessarily going to follow the money. When you're doing something which is on a mobile platform, you can. You can track it, you can see it, you know where it's gone to, and you know who's paid for it, so you can follow the money. When you're looking at some of these online worlds where you're looking at subscription models, again, you can see it. You can actually follow it yourself, so you can see where the money's coming in. Now, I was stunned. I don't know how many of you have worked or looked at the massive multiplayer online role-playing game world, but I was in Korea and I was talking to one of the companies over there who've been doing it for quite some time, and they had 30 million customers who paid $10 a month. That's $300 million a month, and they had been doing it for almost 8 years. I went, wow, that's an awful lot of money. So if you start to look at it, you begin to see that this new world is about different way of thinking about what we do and how to get ourselves into a position where we can follow the money, we know where it's coming from, we know how to get it for what we're making, and we know that who the audience are who want it, and they will want more. They don't just want one thing, they want more. 8 years is a long time. But the world has completely changed, so it's not about saying the solution is a game or an application or a piece of text or a piece of film. It's much more about intellectual property, characters, stories, developing audiences, how you relate to them and how you get the cash back out of them.
So, very good, interesting points. David, at PricewaterhouseCoopers, you're involved in a process that sounds quite exclusive called client acceptance. Mm-hmm. You don't just walk up and hire PricewaterhouseCoopers. You have to be accepted as a client. And I presume you accept people who you think will be profitable, but what are the stages in client acceptance, which might be interesting, how PwC decides who might make it?
Yeah, interesting question. Firstly, I should clarify, why we go through a client acceptance process. And the reason is that we like to get close to our clients and develop a long-term relationship with them. And so we need to feel comfortable with them as they would like to be comfortable with us. And when it comes to particularly early stage companies, it's really important to see whether the entrepreneur is taking risks or taking a chance. And there's a big difference. There's, games of chance are things like roulette, where you really don't have any control over the situation. You hope that you're lucky. But that's not what we look for in client acceptance. We're looking for people who are very focused on their business plan, their ambition is a legitimate one, and their team is good, and they're willing to take risks, but not to gamble.
You've also talked about the importance of the concept in thinking about whether something might be successful or in how to run your business.
Yeah, I think it's a very important aspect. There's so many gadgets that one has, and we've heard, of course, some of them referred to this morning, but there are many more. And, some people refer to it as the tyranny of technology. Actually, it's not technology that's the tyranny. It's, people create tyrannies. And, if you don't have a certain gadget, well, we heard this morning that maybe you won't be seen by your date as cool enough. I think that the variety of gadgets that are around are very interesting, but what is really important is the underlying concepts on which these gadgets are built. And not only the technological concepts, but the human concept, what it is that they're trying to service in the needs of society and business. Because if one understands the concepts, then it's easy to keep up with the field, because the concepts take you forward. It's not the individual gadgets or the websites which come and go and are popular from time to time and then decline, and others rise up and are novel and so forth. It's the concepts that take you forward, and that is why I always stress the importance of understanding the concepts. How do you do that? Look at what's happening under your nose and see what those basic ideas are and see where they'll take you into the future.
So two dissimilar but really similar thoughts about the way to think about this business, which is actually the zeitgeist. Both of you are talking about whether it's following the money or looking at what human need is being served. And that's not really about how many people bought this. It's more about why they buy it and how many of them buy it. We're going to get to Digital Britain in a minute, but before we did that, just so you understand from what direction our extremely distinguished panelists are talking from, I thought I'd ask them just to describe a day in their lives. And I should tell you, by the way, about Digital Britain, that we had a mini mutiny, which I was unable completely to quell, on the grounds that we're in a global business, not in a sovereign business, and we are going to talk about Digital Britain, but we're also going to go around the world. But explain a little bit about your job and how from what point of view you'll be talking about the sovereign abilities in creating digital strategies.
Well, my job is to, as the intro said, to increase the global market share of the digital content companies in the southeast of England, which nobody understands when you say that, so that's okay. Right. Let's just put that to one side. Just to give you a bit of ballpark, we're talking about film, television, music, mobile, computer games, anything interactive, anything online, e-learning, e-publishing, and any of the enabling software. For us in the UK, that's about 20, in the southeast of England. About 20,000 companies employing about 120,000 people, and they have a turnover of about £15 billion a year at the moment, and it's increasing. So it's not small, it's quite big. We're a really small organization. There are 2 full-time staff. So we don't obviously do a lot with each of the 20,000 companies because we couldn't. But what we do get involved in is where we think it's important. So that has been to do with convergence, where we see it both as a massive threat and a massive opportunity in equal measure. A lot of it is to do with how you're prepared for it rather than what it's doing, it's just happening. The Digital Britain strategy obviously became very important to us. So my organization was set up about 5 years ago. And since then, we've been looking at convergence and how to provide an environment in which digital content companies can thrive. And it doesn't make any difference where they are, because the whole point about being global is actually, the minute you say that, the regionality becomes almost meaningless. It's just where they happen to be when I go around to visit their office. But actually, they're trading globally. And Digital Britain is about having an ecosystem within which they can operate. And I think we'll come more to what it's about.
But when you get up in the morning and you go to the office, how do you increase share? I mean, who do you call, or what kind of meetings do you have?
Well, what's been interesting is in order for a company to grow, you've got to look at where are the opportunities for growth. So that's much more what we're looking at. We're looking at the cross-siloed opportunities. So it could be, at the moment, we're looking a lot in the healthcare industry. So we're dealing with the entertainment industry in the healthcare industry. Or we're dealing with entertainment industry in some other part of the world or some other market area that they don't work in. So my job is anything to do from trade missions, taking people places to meet other people, getting people to meet people they'd never met before. We had one session where we got the mobile data aggregators to meet content producers. And in both cases, they wanted to meet each other, but when they actually came face to face, they couldn't communicate. Both speaking English, completely different set of assumptions. So when put together, there was no ability for communication. So they required a stupid translator.
So you also